You are listening to The Craft of Composition. This podcast features the conversation of two composers, Nathan Mays and David Gonzalez. This is episode 1, part 1.
We're going to improvise some stuff and see what happens. Let's say, let's limit ourselves to, I'll play from middle C down.
Sure. Yeah.
And you play from middle C up. And let's kind of go from there.
Okay. My rule is agree that we're going to start, not just jump into it.
Right.
And then once we do, we'll agree to keep playing no matter what until we both feel like we agree we can stop.
Cool. No pedal. actually like really fun. I haven't done that in a while.
It gets the juices going.
Yeah. No, there were some cool things. I was trying to pick up on like those little rhythmic motives you were adding there. Like in the beginning, that when I was striking that G major chord, your little rhythmic thing of da 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 da. It was this cool little like, I felt it as like a triplet, and that would kind of like do like the feather beaming thing, but in like the other like the slowing down version of the feather beaming, I guess.
Yeah, that's how I felt it too.
Yeah, that was cool. Good. I'm glad that came across. Yeah, there were some moments where it kind of like meandered a little bit, but I think like that was a fun little improvisation
that
thing.
Just overall in my mind, it just shows the communication skills that musicians need to have.
Yeah,
be like another thing we can.
I agree. Hi, I'm Nathan,
and I'm David,
and we're playing chess, and just had a little bit of a piano improvisation between the two of us. Well, I guess first off, I kind of want to talk about the amount of communication that was going on there. I think that's a really good topic to go off with.
Yeah, isn't that something that we both understand as jazz players? That I think, to me, is very, very important for any musician to understand.
I agree. I think there's a distinction between like a jazz player and jazz musician, because I wouldn't really call myself a jazz musician, but I like to play jazz.
What do you think? What is the distinction though?
I think
jazz
it's the
player,
same.
Jazz musician.
So like I think it's sort of the same distinction between like I'm a bassist, but I'm not a bass player. You know, like I've sat down and studied my instrument, and like I know the inner workings of it. I know the theories behind it, as opposed to someone who just plays it. And like maybe that's a little pretentious and arrogant, but I've spent a lot of time and effort and money like doing this. Which is why I would not call myself a jazz musician, but I would call myself a jazz player.
Ooh, okay. I can kind of relate as far as drumming. Yeah. There's always been this whole thing in my mind ever since middle school that they say, like, okay, we're percussionists because we're playing in band. We're not just a drummer. Because a drummer is anyone who can be on the street or can pick up the sticks and do whatever they want.
Right. I feel the same way.
So even though we do have those titles, we on a certain level we understand. I get you.
Right. And like I want to make clear, it's not like I'm better than somebody else. It's like I think that there's the distinction is important because maybe it's just important because I feel like I am better than them. No, that's a total joke. No, but I think the distinction is important because we have this like as humans we have this thing of we have to label and like, classify everything, you know. That could actually be another topic to talk about, like labeling and classifications of music and whatnot. But for another time. But to get kind of back on topic here, so like the amount of communication going on obviously is like it's very evident for jazz players. But you said something else interesting that I thought was interesting. That it's sort of important for all musicians to talk, like to be able to do that as well. And yeah, I think that is extremely important. I think that's important too, not just for musicians, but as like an artist as in general. Like what are you trying to convey? What are you trying to communicate? You know, right? Like
once we said that one of the last conversations we had that we were talking about. For me, it's just it always goes back to the human element,
right? And
so the human experience of it is always. That communication is important no matter what medium you're using. You got to be able to communicate. And I think when people don't communicate and stay too far within themselves in their own little world, like I've seen players be on stage performing and just you could tell they're not not playing for anyone else except for themselves.
Which I mean, I think that there's some validity to that. Sure. I mean, like I doubt that Schoenberg and Webern and Berg were writing music for musicians. Like, I mean, not that sounds bad. Writing music for like other people to care about, but more so for themselves. Like I think that they were doing that. But it kind of still comes to this thing of like, what are you trying to say? I think like, what are you trying to communicate?
Right. You want at the end of the day, there should be something that in mind. Even if you're not always consciously aware of it, there is something that you want to say.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, like, I've played with a lot of jazz guys who have been, like, in your soloing, like, what are you trying to say, man? Like, what is it that you want to say? Things like that, or like hearing like a visceral example of that would be like Victor Wooten talking about music as a conversation or like as a language, playing with somebody else, and like if you don't really have anything to say, quote unquote, say while you're playing, then like it's just kind of boring to listen to.
Yeah,
I guess is that kind of what you were saying,
sure.
or trying to say earlier? Yeah.
Because there's a difference between playing a bunch of riffs,
and
a bunch of scales or whatever, and actually playing something that you feel.
Right.
In the moment, that's why to me improv is so important, because in the moment you're associating what you feel with what you're playing.
Right.
The two are one, and just
Right. I know, like, so we were just playing. Two of us just improvising on one piano. Freely improvising, and I know for me, if I want to get into like the technical nuts and bolts of it, like I was specifically listening for like rhythmic ideas and intervals in a certain way, not like, oh, he played a major third there, but there was, it's like, oh, he leapt there, or like that interval was like, there's a succession of intervals getting bigger, or like it got smaller, things like that, So like thinking in terms of shapes, I guess, really is a better way of saying it.
I was thinking because like what you're saying, just because you play like a G major chord doesn't mean that I should be all of a sudden in G major. And
right.
We were both aware of that. And so when I would leap, you were like, okay, cool. It's like it's about kind of like the cells at the molecular level. You're starting small, and then we get bigger and bigger, and then we explore more of the range. Yeah. Right when you were saying that, I thought of Stravinsky in one of those YouTube documentaries. He says, at some point he kind of said, in my mind, there's only intervals and rhythm. And it's like, that goes back to the whole counterpoint thing.
Right,
It's just like, wow, it all kind of boils down to that. And you can see in his music how he really believes that.
Right, that makes sense, yeah. Because, I mean, one of the defining aspects, to me at least, of Stravinsky is like the angularity of everything. Like, I see a bunch of, instead of like smooth shapes, I see a bunch of angles.
Right.
And I think that's an important distinction between like Stravinsky and like Mozart. Like Mozart is very like smooth.
Yeah.
It's like a very placid lake, whereas Stravinsky is this like jagged mountain.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I see there, at least.
Yeah. Well, as far as communication, because we could talk about communication related to jazz forever, but non-jazz players will dismiss it.
Right.
They'll be like, well, that's a jazz thing, but it's not just a jazz thing.
Right.
I think on some level, even classical musicians learn that, whether they're aware of it or not. Because I think of, say, in a symphony setting, whatever kind of thing, they have to be able to communicate with each other. You listen, you're aware of your own sound around you, and the players around you, and the ensemble at large. So to me, that's just the communication of it. It's not just
and
it's on a page or whatever.
Right. It's definitely not just like a small group thing either. Like I'm glad that you brought up the example of like being in an orchestra, because I think if anything, it's even more important there, because like there's 50 of you trying to be unified at one point, and like the way you play things obviously matters, but like your conductor is communicating their sort of like what's the word here? Their like musical will, I guess.
Their interpretation.
Their interpretation. There we go. That's what I was looking for. The musical interpretation, and 50 players have to be aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. So if you think about in a small ensemble kind of thing, it's easier to communicate directly, because if there's only 5 players, you can face each other and communicate. There's more interplay. In a large ensemble setting, everyone's communicating with the conductor, like you said. You are communicating with each other, but it's more with the whole orchestra and the conductor back and forth.
Right. Granted, though, that does mean that you can like hide a little bit amongst other people, So, whereas in a smaller setting, it's a lot more exposed, and
maybe you don't have to communicate as much in the larger ensemble thing.
Right. But I think it is important. I don't know. To me, one of the coolest things about like orchestral playing or even combo playing, things like that, is like I arbitrarily chose the number 50, but like larger Mahler and Wagner works, it's like hundreds of musicians are on stage, and they're all on the same page, or not like literally, but I mean like they're all together, moving through time together. And I think like that's a really cool concept. Like they're all of them are part of like a greater whole. Each individual player, and the whole is just moving through time, and all of them are together as a part of that. And I think that that's really cool. But it's also kind of what's been really like that has inspired me a lot. Like even back in high school, I remember being in a choir and thinking like, oh, this is so cool. Like we're all singing the same thing, and it's like, but we're creating this like bigger thing, and
As far as I kind of had that thought too, because in performance settings, I've had the same feeling where it's crazy that to an audience you're shaping the perception of time.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's just insane to me that someone who's playing a piece, well, on two levels, I think if it's quote unquote good or quote unquote bad, or if it's badly played, right, badly interpreted, or well done. There are times when you just feel like time is going so slow, I'm so bored or whatever, or purposely. It's meant to be that way. Right. But there are times where it's like, wow, that was an hour-long symphony, or that kind of thing, and just flew by. Wow. Time is just relative, but music is.
Yeah, I think a very like obvious point of that, I guess, is like fast music versus slow music.
Right.
Kind of like what you said. Like an hour worth of fast music kind of doesn't seem like an hour, but an hour of slow music seems like forever.
Yeah, even a 10-minute piece of slow music can seem
it seems like hours.
Yeah.
And
the reason I think that a lot of these longer pieces or a well-constructed piece can feel like it has a good flow is because there's a certain kind of sense of narrative that I think a lot of things need to have. When we talk about logical progression of stuff, there's like the sense of like, okay, here's the beginning, here's some ideas, and then you kind of grow bigger. Like there's a varying level of excitement, and it has to have a natural progression towards bigger, than the climax, and you kind of level off. And
right.
I think humans naturally perceive that on a certain level.
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes into this whole like goal and mean thing of like there is like that perfect point to reach a climax. Just a little bit past the halfway point. Right. It's interesting.
I remember once we were talking about in the comp seminar, we were talking about why, like, what is it about that point of a climax? Why is it a little bit past halfway? And what were we saying that it's something like, because if you climax too early, if you had that sense of like the grandness, and then it would just, where do you go from there? The climax has, by definition, it's like even in a movie, you're like, it should be like near the end, because that's what's been building to you, right? Yeah. So in my mind, I always relate storytelling, movies, and music, and it's all, to me, relates to what I was just saying, that human perception of whatever it is, the excitement of something building and tension release, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, that sort of exists, in all facets of art and just in all facets of life, I think. I'm sure, like, hearing like the phrase, "Oh, he's like past his prime" or whatever. It's like, he's kind of already reached his climax, and it's like just downhill from here, buddy. Right. I wonder if that's kind of where the that phrase like "over the hill" has come from.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Okay, that's a very broad question.
Yeah, it's extremely broad.
It's something I think about a lot. So, I guess just that phrase in itself, what does that make you think of?
The craft of composition. Makes me think of a textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just like my first instinct is like textbook, craft of I think I actually have a book called The Craft of Composition.
Probably, I'm sure there's a bunch.
What about you? What does it make you think of? Because I took a very literal standpoint on that.
Yeah. Well, because that's what I admire so much about Stravinsky and a lot of these the masters who just craft their pieces in such a perfect way. And I've been taught that, and I've kind of experienced that listening to their music. But what I'm trying to figure out is like, that's a big label, but what is it that gives you that sense of like, wow, they're crafts, like, they're good at it. craft.
Right. Yeah, I've often wondered that too. Like, what makes one work better than another? Is that kind of what you're getting at? Yeah.
It's not so much about the ideas or the inspiration or like, I love that chord. It's about the logical progression or why does that piece seem to make more sense than another piece?
Right. I remember being in my undergrad and talking with a buddy of mine, and he once said, like, whenever Bach writes hard music, it's a work of art. Whenever I write hard music, it's just hard. Like, and it's like that thought has kind of stuck with me for a while. And like what is it that made Bach's music so great, but this other piece of music not so great? Like what made Mozart, what made Salieri?
Right.
I'm sure like there have been plenty of dissertations written on that, but to get back to like the craft of composition, I guess, like, I think it kind of goes into the, that whole realm of like finding your voice, and I think that's what sort of makes someone not just unique but like good, because even if you don't particularly like something, like you can't deny that it's good or unique. Like I'm not gonna lie, I honestly can't stand some of Beethoven's works, but it's like I can't deny that they're good works. Like, and it's unique and it's of Beethoven.
Right.
It's not him copying somebody. It's like that's Beethoven.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there probably was some elements of like him copying other things at some point, but that was to become Beethoven.
Well, so the craft of composition, I've talked about this a lot with Dr. Clark, because he and I think a lot in terms of analogies, and that's what a lot of the best way to discuss our ideas.
Right.
So since my dad is a carpenter and your dad is like a handyman, right?
Yeah.
That was cool to find out.
Yeah.
I think a lot in terms of like the workmanship, the man in the shed, and toiling away. Like that's the years worth of experience. It's like you're an apprentice, you copy, you do this. So a lot of like again, like in my mind, there's so many parallels of a carpenter, a woodworker, a stoneworker, whatever kind of worker, and what we do in music.
Yeah.
So
I
just think that process, like you're saying, you do copy at the beginning, and you're working through the craft somehow. Whatever it is, that progress. I don't have it pinned down, but
I mean, like I don't think there is like a right or wrong way of approaching that. But what I do find interesting though is that like everybody that's great has sort of done that. Like they sat and copied what everybody did before them, and there's definitely something to that. Like you can't just go blazing your own path and just like think that you're going to change everything, because like chances are you're just going to do stuff wrong.
Right.
And granted, like there probably is some way for that. I mean, like what was it? Van Gogh never went to like art school, but we respect him. There are definitely like plenty of musicians that have done that. But maybe not. Maybe Van. Like, I don't know much about art. Maybe the dude like did sit down and copy like, other people. I don't even. Right. I was gonna say Rembrandt, but I don't even know if that's like. I don't even know if they were contemporaries of each other or not. Like maybe Rembrandt came afterwards. I don't know.
You have been listening to the Craft of Composition podcast. The Craft of Composition podcast will return shortly with part 2 of this episode. Thank you for listening.